Alright, I hope this review's articulate, because I want this review to be articulate, especially for a film like this, as of right now. So, if you care at least a bit about the Cannes Film Festival, you might have heard that Bong Joon-ho's Parasite won the Palme d'Or. Now, Bong Joon-ho is easily the most commercially colossal director in Korea as of right now, and it definitely seems like globally, right alongside Park Chan-wook and Kim Ki-duk and Lee Chang-dong, and definitely Hong Sang-soo, he's one of the top five when it comes to people acknowledging Korean cinema as a form of a very dominant art form and a mainstream force. And everyone over here in Korea is very excited. It's all over the place. Every single poster says, "Oh, this won the Palme d'Or. So if you don't watch this, you're an uncultured swine," or something along those lines. And everybody's happy. Everybody's excited, except for one of my professors. But that's probably because he works in theater. Now, I do want to talk about what kind of a director he is, at least from my perspective. I don't think he's a subtle director, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at times, his films can be extremely melodramatic. Even in this movie, there's a scene where somebody gets kicked out of a certain place, and we see that person coming out of that place, and then a thunderstorm starts. And that's like some old school Hollywood melodrama shit. And there's like this symbolic thing with a rock, which is clearly this thing that's weighing somebody down consciously while also physically, like that kind of melodrama. He's not a subtle guy. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But this results in his movies having a very in-your-face, direct sense of dark humor, and also a sense of tragedy, because humor and tragedy kind of go alongside each other, especially with dark humor. It's like a shot injected right into your brain. And I think he's very self-aware of this, because he utilizes this aspect of his filmmaking and his style. Like, there's this scene where, in this movie, there's a scene where a guy hits another guy on the head with a big rock. Now, the first time, because he hits the guy twice. The first time, you only hear the sound, but it cuts away to another scene. The second time you come back to that scene, the guy who was hit on the head is on the floor, blood coming out of his scalp, and the other guy's like drinking some stuff in the corner, and then he looks at the guy on the floor, and he picks up the rock again, and in your head you're like, okay, they're gonna cut away again because they cut away the first time, but no, this time it's a still shot, you see the whole thing, the rock hits the head in an almost bluntly comedic way, so Bong Joon-ho, he knows what he's doing. And I feel like he uses this aspect of his style to portray socially aware and psychological commentary, because it's so direct. There's no fat there. You get exactly what he's trying to say, in a way that's interesting, but also digestible. And this has been the case with most of his movies. With The Host, he's definitely saying something about man-made pollution. With Mother, he's talking about the Oedipus complex. With Okja, in a really obvious way, he's talking about veganism and the meat industry and the problems with all of that. And unfortunately, that's probably like his most non. That movie's so not subtle to a point where it's kind of a fault, but yeah, it's still an okay film. But usually with his movies, there's always a very consistent tone. When one of his films start a certain way, it usually is that way throughout the film. This is why Parasite kind of stands out, because the dark tone of the movie does not exist for the first half. It's hinted at, but it slowly creeps in, which complements the theme and the structure of the film. And I will get to all of that very soon. But I guess I need to kind of explain the basic plot of the movie, because if you don't live in Korea, and if you weren't at the film festival, you probably don't know what this movie's about. So here's what's going on. There's a really poor family who lives in a house with a lot of bugs and a lot of, they don't even get Wi-Fi, they can't even pay for the Wi-Fi. But the son of the poor family gets to have a chance to tutor a daughter in a rich family. And slowly but surely he schemes each of his family members to get a job within the rich family. He has a sister, so the sister gets to be the art teacher for the son, who's like 9 years old, in the rich family. His father becomes the chauffeur for the father of the rich family, and the mother becomes like the housemaid of the rich family. But they all keep it a secret. They don't tell the rich family that they're all related. They pretend that they've never met each other in their lives. And slowly but surely they get to have this job, they get to have all this money suddenly, and everything's fine and dandy until shit goes down, which is usually how films work. Now, the film actually starts off as a comedy, and quite frankly, it starts off as a comedy that it starts off as a sort of a comedy that I really don't like. The liar revealed comedy, where people lie their way into a certain position, and they get caught, and they're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? And they resolve things, and it's all over. It's very 80s. It's very zany 80s John Hughes style comedy. But it starts off as a comedy, and it is genuinely funny, but there are small things in the back, or just like small scenes, small shots, where the imagery becomes very dark, and there's a lot of imagery when it comes to dogs. It says a lot about how poor people who are not wealthy, people who are struggling economically and financially, might feel less of themselves than they feel about animals. You know, there's a scene where the mother of the rich family takes the tutor, the guy who's trying to be the tutor of the daughter. She's taking him up, up the stairs, and on the other half of the scene, there's a housemaid leading the dogs to their like little food bowls, and that's kind of like saying. Stuff like that indicates this idea of how poor people might feel like they're being led like dogs to money because they're just so desperate for it. There's another scene where the son of the poor family has like a rope around his neck, and there's like it kind of goes. There's like a handle that goes all the way back there. It almost looks like a dog leash. So this sense of social hierarchy within that imagery and how that affects a person psychologically, small images like that are spread out throughout the film. So even in the first half, where things could be this lighthearted comedy, you can tell that something's going to happen. There's a dark tone to it. And I feel like the most real but sad bit of the first half that kind of gives you an idea where the film is trying to go is this concept of how having great hygiene is a sign of privilege. And this is definitely the case, because I've heard somewhere that in Africa, because there's no like free running water there, that actually affects female literacy, because when women grow up, they have their time of the month every month, and if they can't wash themselves, they have to go to school being, feeling dirty, feeling unclean, and they get embarrassed, so they stop going to school, and that affects female literacy. Like that's actually happening. So in real life, hygiene does kind of equal privilege. And in this movie, there's a scene where the young kid, the 9-year-old son of the rich family, starts sniffing around. And he sniffs the chauffeur, who's the father of the poor family. And then he sniffs the housemaid, who's the mother of the poor family. And he says, wow, these two people smell the same. And of course, this kid doesn't know that these two people come from a poor family. But, like, things like that kind of tell you that hygiene equals privilege. And this can be seen, like, even kids notice it. And I think that's actually a really sad part, because, first of all, the kid doesn't mean anything, malicious when he says something like that. He's just saying that they smell the same. But although he doesn't mean it, you can tell what kind of an effect that might have on a person in real life. Like, what if a kid just comes up to you and says, "You smell like a poor person"? Like, that would destroy you. And I think that says a lot because kids don't mean it, but it clearly has a real life connotation to it. And because even a kid is saying that, that means that this problem of this problem with social hierarchies exists. You know, it starts off very early. That it starts off as a really deeply rooted thing. And even the father of the rich says something along those lines. Like, he says, "Oh, you know, those two people, they kind of smell. You know that smell that you kind of get when you go on the subway. Yeah, that smell." Now, rich people in Korea, they mostly have chauffeurs. They don't need to take the subway. Subway is for people who can't afford to just grab a taxi or just drive around in rich automobiles in places like Seoul. You know, you need the subway for convenience, and in a way, not needing to ride the subway actually equals privilege. So I feel like they added that part, and not just the smell part. I feel like they added that part of this, you know, the concept of not needing to ride the subway equals privilege part. I feel like they added that because with the smell thing, that's very subtle. Some people might not be able to relate. Some people might not be able to relate to that, but the subway thing, a lot of people will be able to relate to that. I guess the main thing that I'm trying to get to is this idea of social rage and the economical rage that a person can personalize within themselves when it comes to how they are treated and how they struggle financially. Because the thing with this movie is that, unlike other films that deal with social statuses and wealth, this film does something very interesting. Usually in those kinds of movies, the rich are portrayed as these really conniving, greedy people, while in this movie they might be insensitive, but they're not like evil. They're not terrible people. You know, they're just unaware of what's going on in the real world. Usually in these kinds of movies, the poor people are shown as hardworking and honest and good-hearted and whatnot, but here, they're the ones who are conniving and constantly planning to get more money and to, you know, in a way, kind of leech off of the rich family by lying to them. And I think that's very realistic because the thing is, what the poor family is doing in this movie is not, you should not see it as this evil, conniving thing, because they're struggling. They can't put food on the table. Of course they're trying their best, whether that includes lying or forgery. They don't care. They're trying to survive. So in a way this is very realistic, but their struggle is to escape from poverty. Unfortunately, this comes at a cost, and it comes with a limit. The thing with trying to escape from poverty when you're a person that comes from poverty is that you're constantly worrying about whether or not this will all go away. I think that might affect everybody, but still, when you're really poor, the stakes are high. And that sense of losing your self-worth from starting from the bottom, that's definitely the case for most people. When you start from the bottom, you hear a lot of things. You get to feel very defeated about yourself by comparing yourself to the people who are, you know, higher up than you. And I think this film kind of indicates that by showing multiple scenes where the husband, the father from the rich family, does not want to have this personal relationship with the father of the poor family who's trying to be the chauffeur for the rich family. Like, he does not want to be personal. Every time the father of the poor family says something that can make them bond together, the father of the rich family suddenly becomes really cold. He looks annoyed, and he's like, "Oh, no, let's change the subject," because he doesn't want to be, you know, associated that way with this chauffeur person. And I feel like with these small things kind of accumulating on top of each other, poverty kind of leaves a mark on you. Yes, that they indicate that with the smell thing, but it leaves a mark on you on a personal level. You cannot psychologically escape from poverty even when you have a lot of money. No matter how much you try, there's always going to be a part of you that's still in that dumpster of an apartment trying to survive on top ramen. You can't escape that. It's kind of a form of a trauma. And as a result, you feel defeated throughout your life, at least a part of you. And I feel like that is why... That's how you can explain the finale of the film and the really bleak ending of the movie. I won't spoil it, but it gets really extreme and sad and funny. But it affects you emotionally on a way that can only... I feel like the ending can really affect you if you're a person who thinks a lot about what would happen if you just had no money at all, or if you've experienced being poor, which I have when I was really young, and I know what my family went through. So I think in the end, the film's a really sad movie. The movie's actually really sad. It's a film about, the cold truth and how this affects us. This cold truth about being poor and how that creates this relationship you have with people who are not poor. On one side you have the poor people who are trying to struggle, who need to do things that will make them feel inhuman in order to survive. And on the other side you have people who can probably help to solve this problem, but they are oblivious to the cold truth because they kind of live in their own world, financially, psychologically. And at the end, there's a scene where the father of the poor family is silhouetted and against a really bright, sunny backdrop, and that shot hurts. That shot hurts to watch because that says a lot. It's a very beautiful shot, but you're just like, man, what that shot is trying to tell you about poverty is insane. And I feel like this film is the reason why, what this film is trying to say, poverty is the reason why your father still buys lottery tickets, even though he has a perfectly fine job. This is why us Koreans try to become doctors and lawyers all the time, even though, having an office job is probably still gonna help you survive in life. Because we're constantly being chased by this fear of poverty, and if we have experienced poverty, this trauma of poverty constantly comes to bite us on our asses. And it affects us in a way that makes us demoralized, inhuman, and just overall defeated. And I feel like that's what this film is trying to say. I think it's really effective. It's really effective, and I think it's really good. I'm not sure if it deserved the Palme d'Or. I guess the one thing that I didn't like about the movie is that there is a short amount of the movie where it gets a bit too slapsticky, and I'm just like, well, I get what you're trying to do, Bong Joon-ho. I get your style of humor, but man, this is going on for way too long. I feel like you should do something else here. But outside of that, the movie's really good. I'm not sure if it deserved the Palme d'Or. I haven't seen the other movies. I haven't seen the new Tarantino film. I haven't seen the other films, so who knows? But for what it's worth, the movie's really good. I do think that depending on the person, you might like it, you might not like it, but still, it's a really good movie. This review's already way too long. Bye.